Thank you for joining Luxury Institute's webinar. Today, October 27th, we welcome Dr. Jordan Shlain, private medical founder and managing partner, who will share trends on ultra-high net worth healthcare, wellness, and longevity. First, I'd like to introduce you to Milton Pedraza, Luxury Institute CEO and host of today's webinar, as well as Dr. Jordan Shlain. Milton, take it away.
I hope you're as curious as I am to hear from Dr. Shlain about ultra high net worth healthcare, wellness, and longevity trends. Before I introduce Dr. Shlain, I'll cover a little bit of the topics, the subtopics we're going to cover. First, I'm going to ask Dr. Shlain to give a bio, give us some highlights on his career journey, and also share with us the business model of his practice, private medical. Then I want to go into a quick COVID update because we are concerned. So we'll ask him to please give us a quick update. And then we're going to get into the key topics, the values and priorities of the ultra high net worth individual families with respect to their healthcare, their wellness, longevity. That's going to be the big picture. And then we're going to jump into healthcare diagnostics technologies. What's the state of the art and where are we? And then complementing that, what about the healthcare solutions? So once you've been diagnosed, what is the solution? Is there one? Or should we even be diagnosed? So some provocative questions there. And then we're going to get to a topic that's very hot right now, but in which there's a lot of fact, but also a lot of fiction, which is longevity, treatments, and solutions. And Dr. Shlain is a prolific expert on that. And then I'm going to ask Dr. Shlain to close on the future of healthcare and patient centricity. So Dr. Shlain, welcome. And please share with us your career journey. It's probably moved along since we last spoke, but share that and please tell us about private medical, please.
Yeah, thank you, Milton, and thank you to the Luxury Institute for having me. We'll start with way back in the day when I was born. And I think the first time I was able to actually be aware of my existence, my father whispered in my ear, "Son, you can be whatever you want when you grow up, as long as you're a doctor." And he was a doctor, he was a surgeon. So I grew up the son of a surgeon who was very revered in his field. But he was very much surgery, like, let's cut it out and let's next and let's show people how we can do things and make real progress. My mother got her PhD in psychology and specifically marriage and family counseling. And so she, that was the other influence, which is let's sit down and talk about it for a very long time and work it out. And her summary, I asked her, she's 83 now. And I asked her the other day, we were chatting and she said, all relationships and marriage and family counseling all boil down to one question. Like if we just get the one question right, then you can figure it out. I'm like, tell me. She goes, you can be right or you can be in a relationship. And so these are the twin influences. So I went ahead and went to medical school at Georgetown. I took a year off between UC Berkeley and medical school to teach the science in Kenya. So I was teaching chemistry, physics, and biology in Swahili in Western Kenya with no electricity, no running water, no vehicles, really nothing. Like a farm, it felt like thousands of years ago, nothing had changed. A huge imprint on my life. I recommend everybody that has children to send them off to places that are very foreign and different to help their brains expand as they get older and be open to new experiences. But I by the time I came out of medical school and did my training and finished in 1997, the HMO world was really eating up the healthcare system, specifically in California. And I was unable to get a job because there was no medallions in HMO land for me. So I wound up working for this old doctor who basically had a medallion, and I was going to work with him for 1 year. And after that year, he was going to retire and turn over this practice in the financial district. At the end of the year, he decided that he wanted to keep doing what he was doing and not pay me anymore or as much. And so I quit and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life because here I was out of medical school, out of residency, 1 year doing like another year of residency basically for this older guy. And I walked into a cafe and had a cup of tea and couldn't figure out what I was going to do. There I was in a Mandarin Oriental hotel lobby. I didn't know it. And I thought, this looks like a nice place. So I walked up to the concierge there who had the clay door pin on her lapel. And I said, who's the doctor for your guests when they get sick. And she said, who are you? I said, I could be the doctor to your guests. And she said, you're a doctor? And I said, I am. And she said, doctor, with all due respect, this is a 5-star hotel and everything we do here is 5-star service. She said, if you want to be a doctor to my guests, then you need to be 5-star service. And she said, I'm just a concierge and I'm 2 to 3 star smart, but everything I do is 5-star service. She said, if you're a physician, you're 5-star smart, but your industry is 1-star service. And if you want, to take care of my guests, you got to level up. And she didn't know that I literally had just quit my job like a minute ago. So I said, would you teach me what that means to you, this 5-star service? And she took me under her wing. And the next thing you know, I was seeing presidents of countries and movie stars and Fortune 50 CEOs and senators and basketball players and famous people kind of.
Doctor, what year was this?
1998. And the thing that I did in 1998 that I think set me apart from everybody else was, outside of the fact that, so I gave people my email, I gave people my cell phone number. And remember, email was brand new. Cell phones were just getting small enough that everybody had them. And I was the doctor that was giving people, and I had a pager still because pagers were still a thing. They hadn't been phased out yet, but everybody could contact me instantly whenever they wanted. So, and most doctors still don't give you those informations. Like, it's still hard to get that. So I just figured communication is the most important thing for humans. So let's cut down all the barriers to that so that I can at least have my expertise and my availability be right there. I wound up taking care of the Mandarin and the Ritz-Carlton and the St. Regis. And I kind of ran the table a little bit because no one was doing what I was doing. And I built a little, a 7-doctor practice in 3 years and nobody could believe it. But then the market crashed, September 11th happened. And that business, like, nobody traveled, nobody stayed in hotels. And I went from probably a $3 million a year business to like zero overnight. And I had a big staff. I had to lay people off. And I really learned what it's like to be in the free market of medicine, because all of my colleagues that took insurance were unaffected. If you're an insurance taking doctor, you are not affected by market forces at all. Unless you're plastic surgery or cosmetic stuff where it's cash pay or not insurance based. So, but I also, realized that we don't have a healthcare system. We have a health insurance system. It's a broke fix system. It's not a proactive system. And I decided in 2002 I'm going to start a new model, which is going to be subscription, which is what I'm doing now. And I called it private medical, not knowing if it would work, but knowing that people really don't mind spending money on things that have relatively obvious and immediate value to them. And, you go to, want to fly to Hawaii and stay in a nice place. When you get to the nice hotel, it's apparent that the money that you're spending is valuable because there's nice food, the people are nice, the pool, the weather. So healthcare, you don't get that really ever. So I then went off to build private medical, which started off with me on my scooter making house calls to families. And I had a pediatrician with me. So we always thought the family was the model. It wasn't just adults. So we had an adult and a pediatrician, me and Dr. Chen. And then we decided to keep adding different services. We had a naturopathic doctor to add a little bit of Eastern medicine into the mix. And before you know it, people were very interested. People talked to their friends, and this has been a word of mouth practice.
And was this in San Francisco?
It started in San Francisco. We opened up in Silicon Valley in 2000 and I don't know, I can't remember, maybe 7 years later. And then we opened up in Beverly Hills in 2015. We opened up New York City in 2019, right before the pandemic. And we are opening up Miami in January of 2023. And we're opening up Santa Monica in April of 2023. So business is good because people want to know that they can rely on, there's a fidelity and an excellence and a standards and an ethic and a proactivity and an expert network that they can just park their health. It's we kind of look like a multifamily office for health and medicine is the closest thing I can think about when you think about finance, because the multifamily offices take care of, your business, your philanthropy, your succession. They really take care of your whole life, but they don't know how to tackle the healthcare thing. And we've just built this healthcare thing that's now slotting nicely into family offices because they do want to provide a full solution.
And I've asked you, how can you scale your culture, your philosophy, your great care as you scale the number of clinics? What is it that you do? What do you believe? And what is it that you do to make sure that you embed that culture throughout?
So the first thing is like recruiting and hiring people that are like-minded. And in medicine, it's been so perverted by the financial incentives that, like, the sicker you get and the more visits I have with you, the more money I make. And if I have my own lab, the more lab tests I order on you, while you feel like it's a good idea, and it might be a good idea, I still make money on it. So I decided very early on that I was going to charge an annual fee and not make money on anything else. I didn't want my ethics of like doing the best thing for you to be contaminated in any way by a financial incentive. And so a lot of doctors most doctors that like wind up in primary care, it's a calling, it's a healing art. You go into this to help people. You don't go into it to make money. I mean you have to make a salary and you have to do that, but I think we all assumed that we were in medical school like we'd be fine. But now computer programmers make 2x 3x what a primary care doctor does. So like and I can talk about why that is, but so part of our culture is we tell doctors, look, we're going to give you a lot of resources in terms of nurses and staff, so that you can be the conductor of the orchestra of your patients, and you will have no conflicts of interest, and you can be the best doctor you ever could be. Because in the existing system, they're seeing 30 patients a day, they're being measured on KPIs, and I tell the doctors, hey, look, I'm not going to audit you at all. You're an amazing, smart doctor. The only thing I'm going to care about is if patients complain about service, because I know their blood pressure is going to be under control. I know you're going to be looking at all the latest innovations that we're all looking at, and you're going to bring them to them. I know you're going to do a good job. So a lot of it is just trust. And I have to like embody that myself. And I have to have an intellectual humility to myself that like, there's more that I don't know than I do. But I will focus on getting the questions right and not trying to just be right. I think a lot of people, like my mom said, you can be right or you can be in a relationship. Like most scientists want to get the question, they want to get the answer right, right? If you give them a question, in medical school, all we do is get the answer right. And, but I studied philosophy at Berkeley, fortunately, and I'm really interested in getting the question right. So, because if you get the right answer to the wrong question, you're right, but you're wrong.
Which is often the case, yes.
Yeah, and so like we have this culture of like let's ask each other questions in a non-judgmental way, and let's make sure we're getting the right questions and getting the right answers. And in medicine, as we all know, especially what the pandemic showed us, is like there are no specific right answers. There's a lot of right answers. All depends on your preferences and how you want to navigate the world. So this is touching on what I call personalized medicine and precision medicine, which we'll probably talk about later.
Now, one of the things that we've talked about is that a lot of innovation comes from the high end, and you serve the high net worth and the ultra high net worth clients. We've talked about this before, and your purpose is really to perpetuate your model as many luxury brands and innovations go eventually into the mainstream. And so talk a little bit about that. What's your purpose there?
Well, it's interesting. As I've been building the practice, a lot of people are like, well, what happens to all the people that can't afford your care? And, and my answer is, well, so like, let me get this straight. In what are governments supposed to do? Like, I go back to policy and politics for one, not more policy than politics, but governments should provide housing, education, healthcare, and food for their people, and transportation maybe, and and some other things. But like the things that like without which like they're really problematic. If you don't have food, you die. If you don't have education, that's not a good society. If you don't have housing, like that's a miserable existence. If you don't have healthcare, that's a miserable existence. So if you look at all four of those domains, in food, if you don't have enough food, you get food stamps, or you can go to a fancy restaurant. Housing, if you can't afford housing, hopefully there's Section 8 or there's some government subsidies for housing. But if not, you can buy a house on a fancy island or a mansion. Education, there's public schools, there's fancy private schools. But in healthcare, there's like it's a DMV. There's only one level, and so when you build another level, that's like organized around service and innovation, people can say, well, you shouldn't do that. Healthcare should be for everybody. And it should be, but that's the government's job. I'm out here innovating in a little corner of the universe where people are putting their private dollars at work to get something that's, you could call it experimental, but it's really, really good medicine, because I've organized by looking at the system and how broken it is and how perverse it is like, how do you create something that's different from it and better? Which is really organized around understanding a single concept, that a person, a human with health. So health is what you can do for yourself and what you are in terms of your health. Healthcare is when you need help and you can't do it yourself and you have to go outside. You have to trust somebody else to help you with things that you don't understand, or like if you're really sick, you can't even think clearly. So it's fundamentally baked around trust. Trust is the most important thing. And so how do you build and scale trust? And trust is, if you unpack trust, it's honesty, it's authenticity, transparency, and benevolence. These are the elements of trust. So our culture is we bring that every day. Like we're going to listen, we're going to respond appropriately. And when you look at Tesla, that built their $180,000 Roadster when they started, everybody thought it was a joke, like the fancy little thing with a lot of batteries in it. But then people copied them, and they even came down with a cheaper price car. And now electric vehicles are like the thing that everybody wants, because they know it's better for the environment, better for lots of different things. And so I think, I've been copied many times already. One Medical kind of got their idea from me. I met Rushika Fernanderpool when he started Iora Health.
I know.
The Chen Med. All these things are trying to innovate around the margins of the existing fortress medicine. Mm-hmm. And I just continue to look forward and innovate and hopefully show the world like there's a better way to do it. And I was actually involved in Obamacare in the White House. Ironically, I was invited in because I was the original kind of like what they called ACO, Accountable Care Organization. I don't want to get too in the weeds on that, but I charge an annual fee, and fundamentally, your good outcome is my good income, and your bad outcome is my bad income. The sicker you get, I make less, because it's a marginal erosion of my annual fee, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm highly incentivized to be thinking about your future and your future health, because if you wind up in a ditch, I'm going to spend a lot of time against a fixed fee, and that's not good for me financially, but it's certainly not good for you because you're in a ditch. So I really try to focus on how do we get you healthy and stay healthy, so you don't wind up in a ditch. And if you're getting near a ditch, I can detect it so early, I can turn the car and keep you out of the ditch. So we're very much plugged in. And I think that all is going back to what I said when I started this in 1998. It's about communication. You have to open up the communication channels. There has to be trust, and there has to be the ability to execute a plan.
Perfect. So now that we can segue into your ultra high net worth patients, families, what are they thinking about? How has their thinking about healthcare, mental health, wellness? We'll talk about longevity much more in detail later, but what have you seen? What was the pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and now post-pandemic? What are their values and priorities with respect to healthcare and wellness and longevity? Just a few key insights and trends.
Yeah, I fundamentally think that all humans are wired the same. That whether you have a lot of money or a little money, like it's like, because I talk to people across the entire spectrum, and I take care of people that aren't also ultra high net worth, and but I think what happened during the pandemic, what the pandemic did for everybody, is it showed we all thought about our own mortality. And the truth is we don't normally think about our mortality. We go through life and not thinking about the end. But in March of 2020, and New York locked down, and there was ambulances everywhere, and I actually volunteered in a fever tent in New York, but people were dying, and everybody was scared. Everybody like, oh my God, and then you heard about the healthy guy in LA that started losing limbs, and he started like dying one piece at a time, some famous actor in a hospital. I don't know if you remember that, but everybody thought about their mortality. So that I think was one thing that we all were like, and then which just kind of reorients you in the world. One, two is we all saw that the people that were overweight, diabetic, immunocompromised, like they had diseases, they were the first ones to get sick and die. So I think it highlighted that if you're unhealthy, we've always known unhealthy people, they don't, but that showed that like exactly what it means in stark relief. It wasn't, theoretical.
Right.
And then the third thing that it did was everybody who either had means or didn't have means, when they reached out to the healthcare system, it was broken. It didn't work. It like literally was like trying to like run in tar. You got information that was wrong. Like the clinics weren't open. There was lines.
Getting a vaccine was like putting in a bid on something precious, and then you have to wait in line.
Yeah, and the vaccines weren't there. The whole system just failed.
Yeah, I couldn't go to my doctor for something normal because all the hospitals were booked with COVID, and it's just a mess.
It was a mess. I mean, like if I was the leader when all this happened, I would have done, what China did is I would have built COVID hospitals and sent everybody with COVID over there and left the regular hospitals to take care of the breast cancers and the colon surgeries and the brain surgeries or whatever it was. There was so much stuff that got delayed because there was no thesis. And again, that's a policy thing. I don't want to talk about policy or politics much, but I do think that what we were open, private medical was open the entire pandemic. We were able to secure PCR tests in April. So we were being proactive in checking people and screening and providing, advice and sending out weekly and monthly updates on what the new science says, what we think it means, and actionably what you should and shouldn't do based on it until we get more information. Like, let's not be stupid. Let's not do things irrationally because the science was still so early on. So I think it just reoriented people's thinking. And I think coming out of the pandemic now, there's more of people are more illuminated or enlightened that health is important and they should actually start paying more attention to it and stop taking it for granted is part one. I think when you looked at your mortality and thought, wow, I'm 55, I could die. I think that's what's kind of fueled this longevity thing a little bit more, which we can get into.
Yeah.
And I think people are just generally more interested in their health as an extension of their future. And I also think they're interested in building relationships within the healthcare system that are trusted and have a high fidelity of ethics.
Have a lot of people changed their behaviors? And let's start with the most educated and the wealthiest. Have they changed their behaviors as a result?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are like, so I'm wearing this Aura ring here, and like there's like a lot of things, like if you're really smart and you're interested and you can buy a few things. And this isn't just this isn't just people who are wealthy, but I think people are far more interested in measuring and understanding themselves in a way that they have the agency to do that. It used to be you had to get a blood test from the doctor. Now you can go online, order a blood test, do it yourself. The problem with a lot of this DIY stuff, which I'm happy it's kind of like emerging, but it's too much the wild, wild west. I tell people you don't go to your favorite restaurant because you go to your favorite restaurant because the chef, you walk in there and the chef sourced the food, they have the sous chef, they have a whole methodology and a whole expertise, and they understand that tomatoes from that farm, when they looked at it, those aren't the right ones, I want to get these ones. You're not going to go home and buy the recipe book, and you're never going to copy your favorite chef's favorite meal. You're never going to prepare it like that. So a lot of people think, well, I can go out and buy some gadgets and read some Google things and I can be my own doctor. That's hubris that will generally lead, that will lead to bad outcomes because there's so much nuance in medicine and health, and things are changing so much that if you anchor onto one thing that you think is right and you are not looking at all these other things coming at you, you're kind of solving one piece without like the rest of the pieces. So
now we're going to get into measurement and diagnostics, but I want to stop for a second because one of the trends that we have identified in doing our research with high net worth, ultra high net worth, and probably just all of society is loneliness, isolation, mental health challenges. not only because of the pandemic, but because of the way society these days is very isolated. So talk a little bit about that. Any trends that you see there?
Well, the pandemic was a very isolating thing. Anybody that was predisposed to be anxious or depressed, it amplified that. And, and when you have even anchors within a family that help with those people, and everything starts spinning a little bit more, a few standard deviations out of the realm, the whole thing gets so wobbly that you can't bring it back together. So, one of the things that I think a lot of people are doing is, and I tell people, is like, get out in nature. Nature is a known, proven, scientifically proven, it lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your cortisol. There are pheromones in trees that and in plants and in animals that when you are existing as part of something greater than yourself, you feel less lonely, which is an interesting thing. So, and then book clubs and engaging. I mean, the number one thing for longevity, by the way, and I know I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but the number one thing is not the number of social contacts you have, but social integration. Is how many groups do you hang out with or do things with regularly? That is the number one predictor of longevity. Number one, above it. Yes. So we're encouraging people, and I think a lot of people are starting to travel again together. They're starting to meet again. I'm seeing a lot of book clubs fire up and a lot of wine clubs start to fire back up. Those are the things that are natural anxiolytics. Like, you can take your SSRIs, or you can be with people that, that bring you pleasure or that you trust. So, I can't overemphasize enough how important it is to get out there. Now, for the people that can't get out there because they're too anxious or they're too depressed, the mental health industry is on tilt from the standpoint of trying to get in. So we're seeing a lot of innovations. I was just talking to a guy at Stanford who developed a hypnosis app, and which is interesting because he's a pretty famous Stanford scientist who does hypnosis and with great outcomes. But he said, no one's going to go on an app and use my hypnosis techniques. So he built the app. A friend of his said, let's just try it. It's his voice, it's his video. And they're finding that it has the exact same success as in person.
Interesting.
And then there's all these other apps that are helping people with mindfulness. There's a guy out of Brown, Judd Brewer, who's got an app for anxiety, and they work. But you just have to commit yourself. So it's like a digital pill, so to speak. It's a digital therapeutic.
I'm glad you said that, because I have a friend, Nicole Bradford is her name, out in Silicon Valley, and she's very specialized in that. And when I met with her in Miami the other day, I was questioning her about whether that stuff really works. But you indicate that there are real solutions there.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's so early, and a lot of the existing system was like, well, you have to prove that even more than you've proven it. It's just the old school, kind of a little afraid and a little bit, rigid around the new school, which is part of the problem overall. Is that old medicine doesn't want to embrace new medicine because it challenges their belief systems, their reason for being, which is why I'm really interested in all these new things. I'm tracking all of them to see which ones really get traction, and we try them on our members and even our doctors. We're all trying things. We have a little innovation group internally that we look, and we have new companies present to us all the time about, I've got this new thing. We dig into the science. It's got to be peer reviewed. It's got to be, proven, because there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't. And that's the problem is how can anybody decipher this app versus that app if this guy's got, or this gal's got great marketing? Marketing wins every time. Great marketing on top of mediocre science always beats poor marketing on top of great science. So I feel like I'm not trying to market anybody, but I'm trying to give great science a platform for a stamp of approval. We believe that this is good, and therefore hopefully our imprimatur gives a little bit of lift to our members and a broader group, because we publish and you see me on LinkedIn but publishing stuff that I think is really interesting science that people should be paying attention to.
Well, I do think you are one of the true influencers in medicine. The only other guy I was thinking of was the guy at Scripps who is always talking about, I forget his name.
Eric Topol.
Eric Topol. you know,
Yes,
and I kind of see you
he's a
too.
good friend. He's a good friend.
I would imagine, but I
Yeah.
love his videos and his truth. I mean, I
Yeah.
learned about privacy and medical, you know, data and all of that and all
Yeah.
his philosophies and that I now have because of him. And I've learned a tremendous amount from you. So let's get into diagnostics
Sure.
because that's something that you have talked about a lot. There's, you know, the quantified self ad nauseum kind of literature
Yeah.
out there. So tell us the top 2 or 3 key diagnostics, if you want to characterize them as such, or just riff on diagnostics and what's the state of the art for diagnosing, preempting, measuring,
Yeah.
let's say healthcare.
Yeah, so I break up the world of these things into going back to health and healthcare. Health is what you can wear and what you can buy and what you can do for yourself. So I wear this Aura ring here, and I'm not, I'm not promoting Aura versus Whoop versus Apple Watch. Like there's multiple versions of this type of tracker. I've tried them all. For me, the form factor is like I don't want to sleep with a watch. I don't want to sleep with a wristband. The battery on this thing is like 6 days, and so this will track your sleep. And of the things that I think are really important for diagnosis is we know that poor sleep increases your risk of cardiovascular events in your life. You will have a heart attack and a stroke if you have poor sleep. Like they've studied this up and down. So sleep's critical. So this is it's like I guess a biomarker, but it measures multiple. It measures your heart rate variability. It measures like if you had alcohol the night before, it'll tell you like, so it really tells you like what you did last night and yesterday and how your day is going to be today on a minute by minute basis. But on a long-term basis, if you have multiple nights of sleep that's not great, like you're heading towards a problem. So that's super early diagnosis, like, right. And then there are, so that's like the wearable category. And I'll just use this as an example.
Right.
Then there are blood tests that there are companies now that you can order online and put a Tasso patch on. Tasso is kind of like what I think Theranos wanted to be in a much more, but that stuff now exists. You can put a patch on your arm and it with like 1,000 micro needles, you barely feel it. And with a little thing and it fills up with blood in 3 minutes. And now you have a tube of blood and then you take the thing off and you're done. And then you send it in the mail. So there's a bunch of companies now that are sending these things out. So this is kind of far in the future, but there's a company that's starting now, again, out of Stanford, that's measuring 500 metabolomics. So metabolomics, what is that, right? A metabolomic is like when I do blood tests on, when you see your doctor and they do a standard blood test, CBC, Chem, you've seen it in like Grey's Anatomy and all these shows, get it stat, and you're ordering these blood tests. We haven't updated our blood tests for 50 years. It's the same blood tests. So now there's this explosion in saying, okay, well, we've been looking at these things. It's kind of like looking at the ocean and you can only see fish, big fish. You can't see small fish. You can't see like, algae. You can't see all the, when you take some seawater and you look and there's like teeming with life. We've never been able to see what's really in the blood because we've been looking at these big blocks that we can catch and quantify. So metabolomics look at small proteins, small molecules, really the exhaust of all of your metabolism, and look at it and say, oh, now we can look at these things we've never seen. What could they possibly mean? So they're in the early stages of looking at 500 new markers. This company out of Stanford called Iolo. But the tests that are here now, there's nothing called Cellfree DNA. And that test is now FDA approved. It's been on the market for about 2 years. And it looks so if you have cancer in your body, those cancer cells grow and then they die. And then when they break open and die, they release fragments of themselves. And again, this is like looking at the seawater and seeing like these things that you couldn't see before. So using AI and machine learning, they can look at all these fragments of DNA in your blood and reconstitute them using AI and say, oh, that looks like a prostate cancer DNA, or that looks like a colon cancer DNA. Go see if it's there because we've detected a signal in your blood in a very high resolution way. And you can check now 42 different types of cancer with that test. And you can catch things in stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, usually we know if you have stage 4 because you have all sorts of symptoms. Right. So the goal about cancer is you can't prevent cancer. I mean, maybe you can if you don't smoke and stuff, but you can prevent it from killing you if you catch it early. And so a lot of people talk about longevity as I want to live longer. But I think about longevity as you actually want to make it to your naturally programmed expiration date and not longevity is making it at least there. If you want to go longer, that's a separate conversation. But if you get cancer when you're 70 or 60, that's shortgevity. That's not longevity. And so how do we catch things early that are potentially catastrophic? So that's cell-free DNA, and there's a bunch of companies in that space. There's another. So that's looking at DNA. Then there's proteomics. So there's all these different omics that you're going to start hearing about. So there's a company that we've been using that looks at the protein things in your blood, and there are 7,000 proteins in your blood. We've been measuring 4 on the blood test I was telling you about that doctors check. We check 4 things. Now we can check 7,000, but how do you even wrap your head around 7,000 things? Well, they've back tested using biobanks in England and Iceland and I think Japan, where there's blood samples 20 years back on all these different people. So what they've done is they've gone back to these blood samples on people and here's a guy that he had a heart attack on this day. But what did his blood look like a year prior to that, 6 months prior to that, 3 months prior to that? Wow. And they look, and so they back test blood against to train their algorithms that this protein pattern says that you're going to have a heart attack. So they've got a blood test that with high degrees of accuracy will tell you your 4-year risk of a heart attack or stroke based on what your proteins are telling you. So, wow. And I had a patient the other day that their test came back 11%. And I looked at him and I was like, you are going to have a heart attack. And when it happens, don't ask me, why did this happen? How did this happen? There are things we need to do right now to make that 3%. And we can do that. And that may be drugs, medications, that may be exercise, diet, sleep. There's all sorts of tools in the toolbox to lower risk. But heretofore, it was always everyone got the heart attack and couldn't see it coming. I mean, there are some people that you can tell there's a heart attack coming because they're grossly overweight, they eat like this, they smoke, they have a family history. You just know it's coming, you just don't know when. But now, so I tell people, would you like to shave 100 basis points off your heart attack risk in the next couple of years?
That's an interesting way to look at it.
And they're like, basis points? That's a financial term. I'm like, yeah, because you understand that. Because if I told you you want to shave off or you want to add 100 basis points to your bond portfolio, you're going to be jumping up and down all day long. Yes, sir. So I think part of the key, and I'm jumping ahead and coming back, is that how do you translate all this cool new medicine to metaphorical constructs that people just get?
Okay, but keep jumping ahead and then tell me, because one of the things I want to connect is, okay, so diagnostics are really phenomenal and getting better. What about the cure? You had told me, I think the statement was that the diagnostics are way ahead of the, let's call it, solutions. Yeah. So talk about that, please.
Well, so look, I mean, there are solutions. So I had a guy, a 38-year-old guy who just joined my practice, and he said, my grandma had cancer of some kind in the gut, and my mom had cancer in the gut. So and they both died in their 50s. So I am really afraid of that. I said, well, funny, there's a new cancer test that I just got my hands on. Let's try it. It's new, but it's FDA approved. So we did a test on him. It's called Grail, like Holy Grail. We did that test on him, and it came back positive for colon cancer. And I was like, oh, wow. I'm like, I can't believe this. Because by the way, you don't get your colonoscopy until you're 45, normally.
Yeah.
He may have gotten it at 40 because of the family history, but he would have not have gotten it at 38.
Right.
So we did a colonoscopy, and he had a 2-centimeter tumor in his colon, and but it was stage 2. So we removed it, radiation, chemo. 2 years later, which is now cancer-free. So the solutions still work. So his life is saved.
So you just have to get ahead of it.
You have right now. That's just the stone cold truth, and there are really interesting new therapeutics coming down the pipeline. So cancer vaccines, for example, those are coming. There are, even the mRNA vaccines for COVID. They're starting to look at those and saying, you know what, these types of things are, we can make a cancer vaccine. all of a sudden.
Wow.
The other thing that I did mention when you mentioned mental health, and I want to get back to it real quick and even talk about now is psychedelics. So what are people doing in the space of mental health? That's like, people are far more open, and there's a bunch of studies being done by legitimate, honorable scientists and institutions really looking at ketamine, psilocybin, these are, in micro dosing and all of these. I don't like to call them psychedelics. I prefer to call them neurotherapeutics, because they are helping. Psychedelics is kind of loaded with cultural, countercultural revolution, shit like that. So I do like to think about, so I have had patients try ketamine in these ketamine clinics who have really bad PTSD. They have really bad mental health, and it's changed their lives.
I've heard the same thing here in Florida. I met
Now,
a lady who
that said, it's got to be done by professionals. Like, go buying it on the street and trying it for yourself, like, that's a recipe for disaster. So I think that whole industry is 3 to 5 years away from like mass adoption. But right now, there are people trying and using it that are really interesting. And so those are treatments, right? Those are therapeutics for mental illness. Going back to the cancer vaccine and stuff like that, I was talking with some Stanford neurosurgeons last night at an event. I don't know why there's so many Stanford connections these days, but because I know people all around. But they were saying that there was a woman who had a stroke and she lost her speech. And they decoded the speech area of the brain and implanted this chip where she could just think what she wanted to say, and a little speaker would say it.
Wow.
Because she couldn't talk, because she lost the ability, the muscle, the nerves to innervate her vocal cords. So that's a couple years away, but they just, apparently they won some award, and they're being announced like this last week. So if you pay attention and you look around, like, there's all these treatments for stuff that are coming down the pipeline in all the different realms, even in multiple sclerosis, in Lyme's disease. It's like they're coming up with a vaccine for Lyme's disease that's going on into a real trial soon. So it really depends on where you want to aim the question of, like, let's look at whether it's cancer but ultimately the things that we want to like have great therapeutics and diagnostics for are the things that are going to like snatch us from behind and really hinder our ability to exist. I think about people want to live their lives because they have more money than time. And if you have more money than time, what you really want to use is spend that money on time. You don't want to, if you can. So anytime you go into the healthcare system, and by the way, the healthcare system wants you there because that's how it makes money. You're doing something so you could have been doing something else. Every time you get a blood draw, for example, that's 90 minutes of their blood draw back. That's 90 minutes of your life that you could have done something else. And so how do you organize healthcare around saving you time? And this gets back to this concept, another financial term or an economics term, is net present value. Like, I believe that the net present value of a minute today is far more valuable than the net present value of a minute 10 years from now, because you're younger, you're healthier, you know more, there's all these things. And so people will spend their time doing things about their future minute, but they're spending it now, and that the time they're spending on their future minute now is unproven. So you're experimenting with your precious, valuable minutes now, and you're gambling that it will have some benefit to your future minute. But we all are depreciating assets, Milton. After the age of 24, when the finger and the bone in this finger and your little finger stops growing, we officially start aging. And so if we're all depreciating assets, we should all be focused on, how do we understand the slope of the curve? Where are the pitfalls? How do we organize our activities? What are we doing that we shouldn't? What are we not doing that we should, to make sure? And how do we measure that the slope of our curve is going down as slow as possible?
Okay, so now, because we're riffing, but we're going to run out of time, we have 13 minutes.
Okay.
Talk about longevity, facts and fiction, and then close it with, I think we're may have time for a few questions, but it's so fascinating, I did want to stop you.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, talk longevity.
Yeah. So longevity is fascinating. Humans, we know, live to 80s, 90s. If you have grandparents and parents that live to 100, you're probably going to live to 100 if you don't screw it up. by bad behaviors. So there's a lot of people in longevity now promoting things, pills, drips, all sorts of things, in order to prove that they actually caused you to live longer. You would actually have to set up a scientific experiment with a cohort of people that did it and a cohort of people that didn't. And you'd have to go and play it forward 50 years and see if they did. And then you'd have to prove that, you'd have to do it for another generation. So to prove anything in longevity, like for anybody to say that they have a solution, they're full of it, because they can't prove it. They can prove that some biomarker that we think is linked to longevity. Remember, our body's made of millions of biomarkers. So the people that anchor on a single thing and say, oh, this is it, and if you just fix this thing, then you'll live longer. But yeah, they could be right. They could be very wrong. And I bet they're very wrong, because there's so much more that we need to know about that thing and how it's connected to the 99,000 other things that we don't know when you tweak that, what it does to those things. And recently a study came out about autophagy, which is cellular senescence, and cells that are like zombie cells. And a lot of the anti-aging people or the longevity people say, oh, we have a treatment for the zombie cells that will cause you to age faster. Right. Study just came out literally last week that said those zombie cells aren't zombie cells, and they actually have a purpose in healing wounds. So, and so if you try to kill those zombie cells, then, and you cut yourself, you may not heal properly. And so everything's a trade-off. So I think anybody that's got a longevity solution, has a book, has a line of products, they're selling. And if they tell you what the benefit is, and they don't tell you the risk, or they say there's no risk, they're full of it. They're not intellectually honest. And
so what can I do, doctor? What can we do to try to keep that arc as,
Yeah. So I think that you have to ask yourself, is it safe and is it effective? The first things are safety and efficacy. So just by way of example, there's something called NAD. That people are talking about. It's a nicotine adenosine triphosphate. And so everyone's taking this, or they, these gurus promoting it. There's people writing books about it. This is like one of those longevity molecule things, but no one's proven its safety. Now, people can say, because it's a relatively new drug. There's one company that has done many safety studies on that drug, or on this supplement, I guess it's called. But one of the scientists who I know said, look, I can tell you it's safe. I can't really tell you it's effective, because those studies aren't done yet, but at least I know it's safe. So I think if you're taking something and if you can't show me the safety profiles, you're gambling with your future self. And I think that, so the things, what can you do? What can you do that we know? So sleep, really important. Your microbiome, which is in your gut, which is the 3 trillion cells that are not you, but it's just like a whole other organ of bacteria. You have to feed those. Those make serotonin. They make 80% of the serotonin in your body. You have to eat those. And Milton, you're not going to like this. This is fruits and vegetables. So one single apple is 70 calories and is 50% of the diet that your microbiome needs. So if you ate just one apple a day, you're feeding 50% of your microbiome, which enables you to then you can eat the other 50% in other ways you want. I think people who take a lot of supplements as a way to cheat, eating apples and doing that, our bodies have evolved over hundreds of millions of years, designed to eat the things that we've eaten. So our biology is designed to get these things in the format that we've always been eating them. And so trying to find a hack for them, you're probably, missing out on tons of benefits of the natural fibers, the natural sugars. Our bodies have been evolved for that. So sleep's important. Nutrition's really important. Exercise is important. And look, I don't go to the gym every day. I don't go to the gym at all. I don't have a gym. But I'm active all day long. I'm walking. I have a standing desk. I'm not sitting at a desk for long periods of time. And I try to go out in nature. I ride a boat. I ride a bike. So if you're going to do your exercise, if you have meetings, take walking meetings outside. There are a lot of little micro strategies that you can employ to get exercise. Now, if you can't, then go to the gym once a week. And there's a lot of evidence that exercise is helpful for longevity. And then the social connections, which I mentioned, these are all things that we know. But if you wanted to take a supplement because you heard about it, this one I was talking about called True Niagen. That's the NAD. Like, I can't tell you it works. And then there's people talking about metformin. Metformin is right, but metformin's a diabetes drug, and of course it helps people live longer if they have diabetes. They just started a trial, a 5-year trial that started last month, that they're going to see how it affects people who don't have diabetes. So, like, it may or may not work, but if you wait 5 years, you'll find out, and then you can take it, and maybe it improves longevity. But I don't think it's going to give you 5 or 10 years. It could give you 25 minutes or 2 weeks of extra life. Who knows? But anybody who tells you otherwise that they know is again, that they're selling something.
Fair enough. So, Katie, are there any questions? I know that we've answered a lot of them, but are there any questions that you see out there?
As of right now, no. So attendees, if you would like to ask Dr. Shlain any questions, please feel free to send them in the Q&A.
So then I will ask you one more question. So
Okay.
what is the future of patient centricity look like? You are leading the state of the art. What does it look like in the future? What am I likely to find in the future, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
I think more and more. So primary care is the front door of medicine, right? Like, in general, you have to start somewhere. You're not going to have an expert in cardiology. I mean, you may have a bunch of specialists if you have a bunch of problems. I think right now, a lot of people, I've got a cardiologist, like, they have all these, like, like, to use a football metaphor, they've got great wide receivers, great running backs, great, but they don't have a quarterback. And so they're effectively quarterback. So I think the future is going to be is we need to reinstate the high quality primary care standpoint, and a lot of companies and businesses are trying to do that, because that will help you have time in your life and organize yourself around doing the right things and getting the right information. So I think the future is going to be a lot of great new diagnostics, a lot of new therapeutics, like we talked about, but also specifically, I think the model is going to change, where the healthcare system has to evolve into your good outcome is my good income. It can't remain your bad outcome is my good income, was where we are now. I see some questions here, by the way, on the future of stem cell treatments. So stem cell treatments are really interesting. My friend Len Zahn, who runs the Harvard Stem Cell Institute, and he's like part of the international thing. It's early days in stem cells, but there are stem cells treatments in experimentation right now in a lot of different realms, from orthopedics to strokes. It's 5 to 10 years. I was talking to a scientist the other day, and I said, so is it still 5 to 10 years away before these stem cells kick in? He said 5 to 10 years is not far. It's right around the corner, and I think for a lot of us, we want this stuff today, we want this stuff tomorrow, but the gears of science move slowly if you want good science. So I'm optimistic about stem cells, but these places in Bermuda and Tijuana and the Caribbean and Switzerland right now, we've had a lot of people go and do them out of like a Hail Mary. They've never worked. I haven't seen a stem cell treatment, for like a major problem work. I've seen some work in orthopedics for hips, elbows, knees. If you really don't want to do surgery, you could take a flyer on a 50-50 for stem cells. But that's precision medicine, is like, which people will these work on? And I think that's where a lot of this metabolomics and a lot of this stuff the testing we can do to figure out, will this work for you, will this not, and how well will it work? That's the precision medicine I'm looking for.
So, doctor, is it likely that our kids will live much longer than we do, or at least have much higher quality lives? I mean, how does the human, evolve?
It depends on their behavior. Will there be things like these fountain of youth tools that emerge in the next 5 to 10 years? I think there's so much money being poured into, from all these billionaires and all these people, into longevity science, that I do think, because when I think of longevity, you could talk about the longevity of your eyes. So if you live to 120, eyes conk out on you. Like when you're 90, you get macular degeneration. So can we make the eyes live to 120 if the body can? So we can't just think about the body living to 120. We have to think about all the parts of the body making it, because there's multiple constituent parts. So, do you want to live to 150 if nothing else works? Probably not. So I think there's a lot of science on these specific organs and specific systems, that can continue to live long. And I saw someone posted a question about NERC systems, which are organoids, and organoids are like they took a bunch of cells and put them in a dish, and then it basically functioned as though we could do an experiment on you, but it was your cells in a dish. And again, this is precision medicine. Again, will this drug work? How does it affect? Will it have side effects? I can test a bunch of things out on an organoid instead of a human, because they could be made from human cells. So that's really interesting stuff in terms of how to get to good medicine. It's a tool. It's not a solution in itself.
And finally, biometrics of hips, artificial limbs, other kinds of attachments. How do you see that evolving?
The more we can decode the brain and the nervous system, which we're doing at an amazing pace, and the faster the robotics industry is like super far advanced. And so we're not far from really having a prosthesis that's almost as good as, if not better, by the way, than your original. I mean, it could be stronger. It may not be as fine tuned, so there'll be some trade-offs. But I think the world of prosthesis and the world of even like spinal cord injuries is really, really emerging. And then one last thing is there's a new company called NeuroSync where you can put on some goggles and it will tell you your readiness score, how able you are to pay attention to the world that you're in, and it can train you using eye tracking technology to actually pay better attention and make better decisions in your life. So I'm optimistic. There's a lot of really cool things coming down the pipeline.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll end it with that. I just want to say thank you to you and the audience, and I hope it was as worthwhile for you as it was for me. And well, you end on a very optimistic note. So thank you. And we'll see you again very soon, Doctor. All the best.
Thank you for having me, Milton. And thank you.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye.